Hello and welcome to the Omni Gamers Club podcast, the podcast for games on all platforms, including the atmospheric river flume rides. My name is Mark Uasa.
I am Daniel Winter, also enjoying, well, not enjoying, I guess, the mini game of watching election results in British Columbia this weekend.
It's a very eventful weekend in our corner of the globe,
Mm-hmm.
and not good news in any direction. Just kind of going for the ride.
Broad bad vibes in BC right now.
Yeah, for sure. I shouldn't joke about the atmospheric river too badly because I'm sure some people are affected by
Mm.
the near flooding conditions. I don't know. It's hard to say in this day and age of climate change catastrophe. Should we feel bad for our minor, relatively speaking, climate-related dangers that we're facing? I guess they're all hard for anyone who's affected. So
Yeah, I mean, we've
I
seen a lot
do.
of friends go through the hurricanes down south in Florida, which is
Right.
it's tough to see. But hey, it's getting harder for everyone right now. Climate change is doing its thing.
Yeah. Stay safe out there. Even though I went out today and drove in the storm, but hey, that's a story for later on. Yeah, shall we start off with a little bit of news then? Because this is our playlist episode after all.
Yes, yeah. So what's news to you, Mark?
Yeah, so the playlist, that's where we cover just, off-topic stuff, news to us and games we've been playing. What's news to me is actually a really wide smattering of things. Maybe
Hmm.
it's like the fall gearing up to the holidays and to the obviously eventually delayed games that miss the holiday into the new year. So it's that busy peak time for games
Final
all around.
push before year end. Yep.
Yeah. So it's not quite Halloween yet, but it is spooky season. And I heard tell of a backer kit campaign for a kind of a sequel to a known quantity from Monte Cook Games. So Monte
Hmm.
Cook Games, the publishers of Numenera, Old Gods of Appalachia, The Strange, RPGs like that. They put out a product called The Darkest House a while back, which
Hmm.
is this kind of interesting. I think it's available as a book, but it's also available as computer software. So I think it
Okay.
came out maybe during the height of the pandemic, and it was supposed to like be a product that is horror themed and it could integrate with any RPG system. So it doesn't have to be the Cipher system, which is Monte Cook Games' bread and butter. But it's very atmospheric, lots of moody, spooky artwork. And this campaign is for the follow up for the Darkest Woods. So you're taking it out of the haunted house and into the dark, creepy woods. But I think it's pretty much the same concept. It's going to be in book form and interactive software form. So I'm very curious. I have the first product. I haven't gotten a chance to play it. Really wanted to play it this holiday season, but I guess any season is good for a spooky storytelling. So I'm optimistic for the new launch, the new product.
Yeah, I always have to wonder how well those sort of system agnostic tabletop books work. I was looking at one at a local game store this last week that had a bunch of sort of folk horror monsters in it, but it was system agnostic, but very clearly designed to be D&D, also like fifth edition compatible by default, which is kind of the assumption. And so for anything else, I'm never sure like how much work do you have to do to sort of force it into a different system, right? Or especially if it's something very stat based, which D&D obviously is.
Yeah, I guess like my preference for role playing settings has always been more towards the either the modern
Mm.
or the sci-fi side. So I think, a haunted house could fit really well with a campaign of City of Mist, or it could work really well with The Strange, which is a Monte Cook Games product, which I enjoy a lot. It's ostensibly a modern setting, but kind of with the darker side, the hidden world sort of thing. So alternate dimensions and that sort of stuff. So I think I could make it work. But yeah, you're right. It's going to be hard to do like a modern haunted house thing with a D&D D&D, tavern setting. I guess their sort of standard setting is Ravenloft, right? Which is like the
Mm.
old school kind of Count Dracula
No, it's absolutely
sort of
doable.
setting.
It's more the mechanical, statistical side that I think takes a little more work to sort of brute force into a new system.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, more narrative focused or improvisational stories. It's easier to kind of work new stuff in. But yeah, that's one product from Monty Cook Games, and I'm looking forward to seeing more of.
Excellent. Well, speaking of spooky sequels, I saw this last week. I think it was a couple of weeks ago, actually. They announced that it's the 10-year anniversary of Alien Isolation, one of my all-time favorite games. And they announced alongside that they are working on a sequel. So this is the video game from Creative Assemblies, first-person survival horror in the Alien movie franchise. Exactly the sort of game that is my least favorite type of horror, in terms of there is something stalking you at all times and you have very little control other than to run and hide. But tonally, the vibes and atmosphere in that game are so perfect. So the sort of retro analog technology, so much attention to detail, beautiful lighting. It's really solid game. Runs a little long, but I did really enjoy my time with that original game. Very excited to see what they're going to do with the new one. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that kind of evil creature is summoning you through part of the story in
Like
some
Mr.
games.
X and Resident Evil, but in controlled bursts,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if his name is Mr. X or whatever the one from Resident Evil 2 is.
I think so.
Yeah, I like
X
how
gonna
they
get you.
did that one a lot because it's not all the time, but it's some of the time. So you
There are
feel
safe
like
zones, right? Crucially.
there are, but you feel like you don't feel safe in an area that you visited and cleared out of zombies previously, right? It keeps you on your toes, but not too badly. I
Yeah.
like that, how they handled that really well in Resident Evil 2.
I'm thinking more like the games like Amnesia, the whole streamer type horror game that's just, oh, I'm so scared,
Jump
running away.
scares,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
For sure. I suppose that like transports you into the kind of like slasher movie where you're one of the camp teens or whatever that's running from the big bad. So maybe it's doing good things there. Speaking of spooky games that we've covered in the past, a game got announced in a sort of a universe that you and I are both familiar with. It's called FBC Firebreak, but in a totally different genre from what we're used to covering for the most part. So FBC stands for the Federal Bureau of Control.
Yes.
Which of course comes from the Alan Wake-iverse, Alan Wake / Control universe. So those games are obviously connected through various DLC and skits and the details in throughout both games. But this one is explicitly from the Control universe, and apparently it's a 3-player cooperative first-person shooter where I suppose you play agents of that 3-letter agency. And I like how it's they promise that it's going to be sort of like hop in, sort of. It's not supposed to be a take over your life kind of service-based game where you have to play all the time. You can just jump in, play for a couple sessions, and jump out. And I feel like 3 players is a really nice number. It's pretty easy to get 3 players together to play a session. What do you think about that title?
So I think this was announced as part of an Xbox showcase that I didn't have a chance to check out yet. I heard some basic buzz around this, likening it to Left 4 Dead, a similar sort of cooperative survival game. Curious how I hadn't realized it was a first-person game, which I don't know how that would feel just in that engine and there's those games from Remedy. They're not the tightest games mechanically. I don't know how well it would the shooting would feel there.
I
But
really like the action in Control.
oh, as a third-person action game,
Yeah.
sure, but it doesn't feel like it'd be super tight for as a shooter.
I think Remedy can pull it off. Like they are kind of known for their gunplay. Like they have a bullet right into their logo. And these are the people that put together all the Max Payne games. Right, they invented bullet time as far as video games are concerned. So I think they can pull it off. They got the talent, and they haven't had like a burn the world down huge global hit, despite the fact that Alan Wake and the 2 games there and Control are of such high quality, narratively and mechanically. So I think they deserve it. I'm hoping for good things for this, but I don't know. Multiplayer service games are so difficult to succeed at. So who knows if there is an appetite for that sort of game.
Yeah, and especially when Remedy just made a big announcement of a partnership with Annapurna Games, literally a week before that whole company closed down. Well, it was like basically everyone mass resigned. So I'm
Right.
not entirely sure what state that arrangement collaboration is in anymore, and what the status of their games are. But I think they also announced a new DLC for Alan Wake 2, which I still need to play the first one. I did quite like that game.
Nice. All right, so that's FBC Firebreak, and it is scheduled for release in 2025 via Steam, Epic Game Store, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, but it's coming to Game Pass day one. So if you're subscribed, you can play it for free.
Very cool. Well, another big announcement I wanted to quickly talk about is a new game called Sunderfolk was announced in development. So this is a digital board game, I'm led to believe. Basically, so this is from was it Secret Door? Apparently from the co-founder of Blizzard, Mike Morhaime. So he's sort of moved on, created his own studio, doing some sort of cool smaller projects and what Blizzard is typically known for. And so this is basically a mix between Gloomhaven and something like you don't know Jack Drawful, those sort of app-based phone games that you play in person with a bunch of friends sitting in the same room with their own individual phones controlling a game on the TV.
Yeah, I
And
think
so
the popular series is called the Jackbox games.
that's what.
Right?
Yes,
Jackbox
yeah.
Party Pack.
Which I mean, I played a lot of those games when I was living in a share house basically with a lot of friends. Those games were great. Don't have a lot of space for them in my life right now. We don't sort of have regular groups of friends coming around to hang out. But hey, maybe that's a side effect of you know what. So I am very curious to see them playing with that trope, but with a more fleshed out sort of narrative tactical game. So this is a fantasy tactical grid hex based game. Looks very similar aesthetically to Gloomhaven, which is the obvious comparison. Though I have also seen some comparisons to Descent, specifically the new edition of that, which was an app based game, and there is actually some ex not Final Fantasy. I always get that mixed up. Fantasy Flight, that one. So next Fantasy Flight people involved in this who have worked on Descent. So there's a lot of cross pollination going on there. Don't know a lot yet, and again, I don't know if I have room for this game in my life. But it's cool to see. Hey, something like Gloomhaven. It's a very aspirational game. So many people love the idea of that, but when it comes to actually getting it to the table, setting it up, explaining it to your friends, it's a lot of work, right? Those games notoriously sit on the shelf unplayed. So anything that streamlines that and with a more, hey, if it can do some more narrative voice acting and some cool sort of pizzazz around that type of game, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I am of mixed feelings about products like this. I mean, you and I played that Descent, the second one, the more recent one that came out, and I came away kind of feeling pretty meh about it all. We didn't continue it after the first session we played anyways. Maybe we should continue it and see
I was keen to,
how
it
we
just
feel.
didn't happen.
Yeah, and there are other products as well. Like, I can't help but wonder if the people that are making products like this are sort of missing the point of analog games, of tabletop games. I see that they're trying to capitalize on the growing popularity of it, and surely some of them are lovers and respect tabletop game designs themselves. But I wonder if these sort of hybrid products are just going a little bit too far and trying to smooth things over that really don't need smoothing over. But I don't want to be too gatekeeper-ish about this sort of thing because I can't afford Gloomhaven or the big Frosthaven set. I knew existed, but I never invested in it. I have Jaws of the Lion, and I think I haven't played past the first introductory mission. You said the word aspirational. Maybe for some people it's aspirational, but I think for some it's just an impossibility. Like, being able to afford it is an impossibility in one.
Having the space for it.
Having the space for it is another hurdle, and then having the commitment to carry on and play multiple of those missions is a third hurdle. So maybe something that makes that simple digitally and it gets played for 3 or 4 sessions at a third of the price. Maybe there is a need for that product out there. So I think we should try it out when it comes out.
I think there's absolutely an audience for it. I mean, personally, if I've got a bunch of friends coming around to play games, we're going to sit down and play a board game, right? I just don't have
Sure.
the right friend group for it. But hey, I can see it working with certain groups for sure. I do wonder, like, it looks fairly involved in terms of the tactics and swiping through the different cards. Like, it's a card-based system, and I think I would struggle with this visualizing all the information on my phone and the screen. I like having everything visualized in front of me, right? So
Yeah.
again, not for me, but I think I like to see experimentation in this space.
Yeah. Obviously, you and I both like tabletop games. We like role-playing games. We like video games. That's the whole point of this podcast. But I like that I can step away from this sort of type of play and try this sort of type of play. I like that disconnect. So I don't need everything to be hybridized. But I don't want to speak for everyone.
Fair enough.
Okay, I'm going to do a couple quick announcements because we've talked at length already. So during the Xbox Partner Showcase, they announced Subnautica 2, the sequel to the highly popular kind of underwater survival exploration game. So I haven't played enough of Subnautica 1, so I think I'm going to go back to that. But I'm definitely curious about 2. Love sci-fi, love kind of survival cooperative, especially this one. It's going to be fully cooperative.
Yes, yeah.
So that's super exciting. I don't know if it was announced in the same thing, but they announced something that was obviously coming. Starcraft 2 is coming back out. It's a campaign-focused pack. I think it's coming to Xbox Game Pass, PC probably. Don't quote me on that. But also, surprisingly, maybe not surprising to some, but they are putting out Starcraft again, remastered this time.
Oh, okay.
So the original game comes back, and it's high res, big screens. There's a little teaser trailer for it, and it's basically bringing it up to what you think it should look like.
Those rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, exactly, the rose-colored retro game glasses. But it's not going to blow you away in terms of ray tracing and modern day graphics. I think it's going to be just right, just kind of respectful remaster of that. So that looks exciting.
I mean, I would like to be excited about that, but on the same hand, that Warcraft 3 remaster was not a good time.
Oh, didn't play it. I guess I'm not really the trad fantasy guy myself, so I didn't get into that.
That hit me when I was 14 years old. It was the hit perfect. So a lot of nostalgia for that. But yeah, by all accounts, the remaster was pretty botched. I didn't play it myself, but didn't have a good reputation. So yeah, Blizzard still having a bit of a struggle there. I am keen to try the StarCraft 2 campaigns, which I only ever played the first one of.
Yeah, I never played them through either, so I'm hoping that this is my proper opportunity now. And just a couple other announcements. There was a Steam Next Fest in all that busyness and hoopla. And there was one game that kind of jumped out at me that looked pretty cool from that. Haven't gotten a chance to play it yet, but it's called New Arc Line. And apparently it is a kind of a spiritual successor to a CRPG I love called Arcanum, which was from a now defunct developer / publisher called Troika. And they put out that game, Arcanum. I think they put out a version of Temple of Elemental Evil, which is a D&D based game. And then they also put out a Vampire the Masquerade game. One of the Vampire Masquerade games. I forget all of the subtitles of those. So they put out one of the newer ones of those, not the recent set. You know what I mean. So, I like where steampunk meets fantasy, and that was what was so great about Arcanum, on top of the excellent characters and the world building. So anything that tries to recreate that world, I'm super excited for.
Yeah, been lots of announcements these last couple of weeks from all ends of the Omni Gaming spectrum. So, one thing we want to talk about, we hinted at briefly in our last episode with Anna Maria, was that we were both dipped down into Bellingham a couple of weeks ago to take a look at some locally made games. And so I thought we should discuss a little bit about what we saw down there. These were all mostly prototypes from local designers, but some very cool stuff going on. So yeah, what was your highlight from the Bellingham? I don't think it really had a name. It was just, hey, here's some local designers rocking up at a game store.
Right. So the event was at Aegis Games,
Mm.
which is right downtown. I think it's called All on Railway Ave, potentially. It's kind of right in the middle of town. And this is actually a game store that I go to fairly frequently when I go down to Bellingham. A nice space, lots of game tables for Magic and Warhammer and games like that. Really great space, I think. I wish we had a space like that closer to us. But they had some fun games. I think a highlight was definitely getting to play, getting to see Emma Larkins there. Of course, Emma and Anna Maria have their campaign for Epilogue, which is their latest game from Violet Daisy Games. It's a narrative-based game. Kickstarter right now. Go check it out. The campaign, and we covered it. I think better. We covered it, of course, in our last episode.
Yes.
Go check out that. So it was a pleasure to see those fine folks. And related to Violet Daisy, there was Popcat. This name always trips me up. It's called Popcat Fighters from Estefania Rodriguez, and the artist is Arnell. I don't know Arnell's last name. Yeah, first of all, Arnell had an awesome, what was it? Angry Crab? Aggro Crab hoodie on. And Aggro Crab,
Yes,
of course, is the developer of Another Crab's Treasure, which is a fantastic game that we covered in a past episode. So had to chat him up, and it was a pleasure to speak with him. He's the very talented illustrator of both those games we just mentioned, Popcat Fighters and Epilogue. Really delightful, colorful artwork on both sides, really evocative. And Popcat Fighters is a sort of kind of a Street Fighter kind of like mano a mano
duel,
fighting game, sort of themed game. I didn't get a chance to play it at the event.
No.
Have you played it?
No, I was egging to for the entire game day, but we never quite lined up. There was always someone else playing it, so I didn't quite get it in. But I'm sure there'll be a chance. I will see Estefania around at various other conventions. My daughter is sporting one of the pins she got that she's been showing off very proudly, and having to ask me 5 times a day, "What's the name of that game again?" Popcat Fighters.
So you already got a fan there, a young fan. Yeah, it was. I guess that's a good sign if the demo table was already full up.
Yes.
Obviously, Estefania was doing a great job of demoing the game, and it seems like there's some interest there. Estefania, I follow her on social media, so you can follow her to find out more about Popcat Fighters from Violet Daisy Games. So what other games do we see, Daniel?
So the next game we saw was Chicken Fried Dice from Ashwin Kamath at Urban Professional Games. And I think that might actually be a co-design with Rob Newton, who we also spoke to there. So this is a roll and write game, real time. So you're rolling a bunch of dice into a bucket, and then in real time grabbing a dice, filling it in on your dry erase board, and then before you can grab a second one, right? So
it was Galaxy Trucker style.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to try this in action. So I mean, real-time games can obviously go many ways, but it's a cool idea in terms of having small bursts of real-time friction, right? And some cool twists on the roll and write elements. And they had this little. I'm not sure what the final board's going to look like, basically. So he had these boards that had little screens that could pop out and flip them over to an upgraded side.
I'm not sure if it was going to be dual layered, but it's like a slotted kind of thick cardboard.
So, but the board, your actual board can change over the course of the game, right? So some cool ideas they're messing with there. So that was Chicken Fried Dice. Very curious to see how that develops.
Right. And you were mentioning, I think it was Rob from Coin Flip Games, doing double duty there, representing Urban Professional Games and Coin Flip Games. And Rob introduced us to Trickadee, which is as you might imagine, it's a bird-themed trick-taking game that has some kind of interesting things that it's doing there, like with suits, bird varieties, and I think it also has dice drafting. Am I mistaken there? It's a
Mm,
drafting component.
I don't remember there being dice. Basically, it was a trick taking game where you're playing cards into the center, and then drafting those cards back into your hand again,
Right.
in
Yes.
sort of the order that you win the trick in. So it actually reminded me quite a bit of a recent trick taking game called Pies from All Play. That was a little light for me, but this seems to be layering on a few extra mechanics in terms of set collection and other ways that you can
Yeah, I seem to
pull
recall
these
that there
cards in.
was many sort of scoring conditions
Yeah,
and many
yeah.
ways that you could make sets. So you could potentially score, multiple of those conditions depending on which cards you cleverly play or draft. So seems like a really interesting, deep system.
Mm.
And not just your typical trick-taking game. So it seems like quite promising. The art is pleasant. Obviously, bird themes. It's not the first bird theme game out there, but this one has pleasant colors, artworks, line illustrations. Yeah, I think this game is one to watch for sure.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, trick taking games. There's so many of them out there now. So the smallest twist on that can completely change the dynamics of how any one game works, right? But I love some trick taking. Always love to see some more of those out in the wild.
Right. So another, I guess, established company we talked to was Thing 12 Games. And we played actually a couple of rounds of their games, and not some of these were not brand new. So one of them, which is a product that's been out for a while. Actually, let's talk about it a bit later during our
Okay.
games that we played session. But that would be Matches. So that's an existing product of theirs. Yeah, the new game that they were showing off was called Puppy Pile, and this one
Yes.
is more a squarely like family oriented game. I actually thought it was a little too simple for me or
Yeah,
adult
and for the
regular
time that it
play.
ran on a little bit, I think. But I can see an audience for it for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, it's essentially about trying to get your pup up to the top of the pile, but the pup that you're sort of aiming for is hidden. So there's a little bit of hidden roles, hidden characters there, and every player is trying to support a different pup. But out of the dozen or so of them, you're just supposed to carefully watch what the other players do, and see who you're trying to move up to the top of the pile. But watch out, because if a certain effect gets played, what was the top of the pile might turn out to be the bottom of the pile. So there's twists and turns there.
Yeah.
Nice family weight game.
Yeah, so that I think just was released this last week. I think it just came out from Kickstarter. There's other games that we'd or also discussed are all in development still, so you can't actually buy those games yet. But Puppy Pile, I think, should be available now.
Right, and I think that I saw an announcement for Chicken Fried Dice as well, so you can sort of sign up to follow it.
Yes, yeah. I mean, it'll be on Kickstarter at some point in the future, I imagine.
Yep, there you go. Go check out Epilogue. It's the campaign is live now.
Indeed.
All right, roll into games we've been playing.
Yeah, let's get to it. So,
All right.
what have you been playing?
All right, got to start off with me. I guess I have a few more video game titles at least.
Okay.
So I booted up a game on PC. I got a somewhat newer game PC. The excuse is that I use it to edit podcasts, but in fact, I can use it to play games. And this game is on PC Game Pass, and I've been meaning to try it for a while. It's called Ara History Untold. And it's basically like a Civilization-like.
Yes, that's right.
No lies there. It's a Civilization-like, but it's trying to take down the king, who is the Civilization series. Civ 6, Civ 5, and Civ 6 are massive. Civilization 7 just got recently announced. So it's coming soon. So those are the behemoths in that category, obviously, of the 4X Civilization type game. But for some reason, competitors are still trying to chip away at the king. And one of them that came out a little while ago to not a lot of fanfare, I think it was called Humankind.
Yeah.
Did you play that one at all?
A little bit, and I bounced off of it. I mean, I rarely finish a Civ game as it is, so any game that doesn't live up to Civ, I'm definitely not finishing, right?
Yeah, the hallmark of a good Civilization game, or of Sid Meier's Civilization, is that you can't stop yourself from playing. right? It's sort of the originator of the just one more turn,
How more
just
is it? Yeah.
just one more turn game. And I played Ara History Untold, and I could not make myself keep playing that game. I I saw what it was trying to do there, and some of it I appreciated. It was doing some interesting things, like you could manage different cities, but essentially, sort of everything within a nation was a singular unit, so it was more like connected. It was less about managing multiple equivalent cities,
Hmm.
and more about weaving this like unified web of cities. So some of that was cool. Some of the managing of the units was a little bit confusing. I like what it was doing with sort of resource utilization. But all in all, I guess I felt like it didn't really introduce anything new to
Hmm.
the genre. So I was really hoping for something that tried something different. This is an old game, but I really liked this older game called Rise of Nations,
Oh yes.
which is also on Xbox PC Game Pass, if I'm not mistaken. But it was trying to be a bit of a hybrid between, it's more of an Age of Empires like real-time
Hmm.
strategy, but the real-time strategy elements were sort of tight and encapsulated, and the matches that you won in close-up real-time matches affected a larger overworld map game that you were playing. So it was kind of like 4X meets
Huh.
RTS, and I thought that was doing some innovative things, and this was 10, 15 years ago. So I don't think either of those games, Humankind or our history untold, really are doing anything innovative or that much to challenge the King
Not
of the
much to
Hill.
write about in the history books.
Yeah, so
Okay.
that's a little unfortunate, but
Hmm.
had to try it out.
Excellent. Well, I've been as the year's end rapidly approaches us. I've been trying to wrap up various games to various successes. I finished Heaven's Vault, which I talked about a couple of episodes ago. Not a lot more to add on to that. It was mixing a very interesting sort of sci-fi character-driven story with a historical investigation. So interesting balance there. I didn't feel like it entirely meshed together some of the story elements in terms of being very open-ended and how doing things in multiple order. You it often would deliver information as if I'd already been given a setup to that information elsewhere. It's like getting the payoff without the setup, right? And so, because if you're doing things out of order or making certain choices, there was a puzzle piece missing somewhere there, and so things never entirely clicked. I think I missed an entire side area that would have been a huge info dump. The thing is that the game it is meant to be replayable. Apparently, all of the information, like all of the translation that you learn over one playthrough, carries across to the second playthrough, and suddenly there's a lot more that you can translate. So curious to dig into that. It is a very long game, so I don't know if I have time to do a second playthrough, but I'm curious how it develops that, at least for a little bit into a second playthrough. So I'll take another look at that. I managed to finally finish Yakuza Like a Dragon after the better part of a year. I've been picking away at that. That is a long game. My controller timed out twice during the closing credits, I believe. A game I largely liked, but it dragged a lot in terms of just every little bit of information had to be dragged out. Like every twist, they had to re-explain every single piece that led up to that twist. Which, I mean, hey, it's an 80-hour game. If I'd played the setup 2 months earlier, I wouldn't have remembered the payoff to that anyway, right? So sometimes I needed that, but that's exactly why it had taken me 2 months, because I take so long to drag out every little bit of information. But it was a very strong story. It remained to the end a very heartfelt and sincere story about sort of found family, and despite the sort of violent themes participating in. Fun game. At least 5 more Yakuza games have come out since I started playing this, I think. So a lot of catching up to do. Yeah, I enjoyed Yakuza Like a Dragon.
Yeah, I think you started playing that game after me, and clearly you finished it before me. So I have to agree that that game has issues with, I guess, pacing.
Mm.
It's sort of at odds with its own design, because this game obviously has sort of like mild open world roots, and I think people like these games because it has those open world qualities. Those side missions are infamous now for how kooky and off the wall they are. So obviously you want to see everything, you want to do everything, you want to see all those ridiculous side missions. But I guess that tension kind of drags me to kind of not push the story forward. And when the story is moving forward, I agree. This series is, a rip-roaring ride of twists and turns, of really interesting, sympathetic characters, and fun and evocative storytelling. So, am I the bad guy for complaining about the open world side of it? I think people would complain if that element wasn't there in these games, right? If it was just a straightforward narrative shot. So I just got to buckle down and push myself through it.
Yeah, I completed most of the side stories, I guess. Anything that had actual narrative to it. Most of the other mini games I avoid. Like you could spend hours playing the Mario Kart analog or the Pac-Man analog, or just playing golf or baseball, right? Like there's so much in there that you can get lost in the weeds.
You got to see it all.
Yeah, at least try, have a little sample, and then move along. I maybe would have liked if the game encouraged you to go out and experience those in a more sort of spread it out in a better paced sense. There's only one time where the game's like, hey, we need 3 million yen, so go out and figure out how to get some more money, right? So other than that, the game never really encourages you to explore and sort of taste those side materials. So it's up to you to make your own pacing in those games.
Right. Yeah. Gotta go back to it. That's some quality stuff. And you're right. The new, obviously, there's a direct sequel to Like a Dragon.
Infinite Wealth. Yep.
Yep. And then there's a side story with Majima for Infinite
the
Wealth.
pirate one was just announced. Yes.
That's right.
There was Ishin, which was a remake of an older game that was like in medieval Japan. There was the man who erased his name, which I think is like an in between 7 and 8. So yeah, lots of Yakuza if that's what you're into.
Too much Yakuza, to be honest. All right, I'm going to talk about another PC game really quickly that I tried out. It's also on PC Game Pass. It's called Keplerth. It's a game I've been meaning to play for quite a while, but it's of a really well-known genre of games. It's sort of like a Dwarf Fortress like.
Okay.
There's other games like it. Like I think RimWorld is another sort of similar top-down survival sort of colony survival game. I think Survivalists is more like a lighter, more I guess action adventure-y style twist on it. But these sorts of top-down survival games are quite popular, and I am attracted to them, but I don't know if any of them have really hooked me. And this game is the more likeliest to do that because it is sci-fi. Basically, your memory is wiped, you crashed on a planetoid, and you gotta survive and escape. Very, very typical story. Not much outside of that. And the storytelling, like the art is very, very basic. Like it looks like almost clip art quality. And it is 2D, but it is a tree puncher as well. So you literally start off punching trees, picking up rocks, making very basic tools, and going from there. So it's treading a lot of well-trod ground there. Not really blowing me away, but I'm led to believe that this game is quite popular. So I'm going to try and keep at it for a little while.
I mean, it's going to be pretty big time sinks, those tree punches. So if it's going to catch you, you want it to be doing something unique or get you early, right? You need that hook.
Yeah, it's got to, like a lot of the games we cover, it's got to represent something innovative to deserve its own day in the sun, for sure. All right, so there's another game I played, and then I played Halls of Torment, which you pointed out to me, but it's actually a game I've been playing for a little while. It's a Vampire Survivors like.
Oh, the one that's like Diablo aesthetic, right?
But it has older school sort of pixel art aesthetic to it, and it's actually really sharp. Like this game looks great, and it plays great too. It actually does manage to make itself stand out from Vampire Survivors. It, for instance, has manual control or optional automated aiming, for instance, to make it more of a vampire-like. So, whereas that game, 20 Minutes to Dawn, I think I mentioned, I really like for its direct action control. This one I just enabled auto control because it doesn't really make that much of a difference. And the interest here comes from the exploration of the map, trying out different upgrades, and trying out different character classes, which is something that, well, I guess all those games have. Vampire Survivors has a ton of character classes, but this one tackles it in interesting ways, and I guess a little bit more along the lines of more traditional action RPGs. So this game, I think it deserves some attention, and it is a pretty solid one. So, Halls of Torment, is that what I said it's called? What is it called? Halls of Torment, yes.
I think so.
All right.
These names all ring. I cannot differentiate any of those survivor likes. I've heard
Too
good
many.
things about this one. I struggle to make time for them. I don't want to get sucked into one of these. Right. I'm curious, but I don't have the time for that.
Yeah, this one I think it's worthy. It's worth some attention.
Sure.
I had a generally positive opinion of Vampire Survivors 2, but that one I like playing multiplayer these days with my kids.
Excellent. Well, I mean, as I've discussed various times, including last episode on Cult of the Lamb, I'm just very sensitive to those having my dopamine exploited, right? And those games are all about that condensed down.
I think I've managed to. I think I weaned myself off of Cult of the Lamb. I think I've quit.
Oh, okay.
Glad that I played, but I think I've quit. I'm going to move on to other games.
Excellent.
Speaking of other games, have you played any other?
Yeah, just quickly. So, I mean, having finished a couple of big games, I was excited to get to one of the dozen or so indie games that have come out the last few months. But of course, instead of that, I downloaded the demo for an 80-hour JRPG. That is Metaphor Refantazio.
Oh, you went for it, huh?
So this is the demo I'm playing, and I'm about 5 hours in, and like no sign of ending yet. So there's quite a chunk there. So this is the new game from Atlas, makers of Persona. So broadly, I mean, I'm very early in, so this is very much initial impressions. Broadly, the similar structure, and it's a day by day schedule. You've got certain deadlines that you have to fulfill certain objectives before X number of days pass. Each day you have basically choices as to who you're going to spend time with, or whether you're going to train some attributes or various other side activities. But it's mixing that. I mean, obviously this is a fantasy, like a fantasy political intrigue game as opposed to a high school game. I mentioned briefly recently Dungeons of Hinterberg, which was playing with that structure in a vacation framing, and I really appreciated that broad sort of calendar type structure outside of a high school setting and a more adult sort of themes. So this is again playing with some a new take on that. Again, it's still very much in the early extended tutorial, so it's all very linear so far. I haven't been presented with much choices. Tactically, though, it seems quite interesting in that you're not dealing with the actual personas anymore. There's that really weird Pokemon style system where you're capturing the various Freudian archetypal creatures that were suggestive in various disturbing ways, and having to fuse them together constantly to keep your stats up. And I just always found that element of Persona extremely tedious. Whereas here, you basically unlock classes, and you just each character you meet will have a default class that you can level up, and then at various points you can choose to customize their classes. So you can have all warriors or all mages and mix and match what classes are in your party. So fairly simplified version there, but also some strategy in what characters you give to which class. Again, not much customization yet, still very early, but it's left a good first impression.
Nice. Yeah, I'm afraid of that game because I think it really will suck me in. But also, I'm kind of torn about Persona games. I really love Persona 4 Golden. It was couldn't put it down sort of game on the PS Vita where I played it. I know that it came out on PSP first in the original form, and it's since come out on every other platform. But Persona 5, I played, I guess, the first quarter of, really enjoyed that. It left Game Pass, and I've sort of been uncertain. Do I bite the bullet and buy it? By the way, Persona 5 Royale is on 60% off or something on Switch, and I was seriously considering buying it today at that price. But even though you already have a Persona 5 at home, it's called Persona 3 Reload or whatever, still on Game Pass, I think. Still can't make myself go back to that. I'm kind of sick and tired of that high school daily loop relationship builder. Just get on with the damn story and advance the action. I don't know. I shouldn't say that because obviously this sort of deep relationship building is unique to that system. At least it's much more deep than, basic old school relationship systems where you, I don't know, say yes or no on a text dialogue tree, or you give them just the right gift or whatever to up your relationship stats with the character. These really like basic relationship systems from other video games of yore. So obviously that system, that formula, really works for Persona, but I guess I'm just tired of the repetition.
I
So
mean,
highly repetitive games.
it's an extremely compelling framework, but diminishing return each time you go back to that well, right? I mean, some people are really into that school setting, but I don't need to keep doing that same formula over and over again.
And you always feel like you're doing it wrong, right? No matter who you spend time with, you're always
Yeah.
thinking, I should have spent it with her or him.
What's the thing about, because playing Persona 5, I felt the need to, like, if I'm going to play this game once, I want to see everything. I'm going to follow a guide. This is what you do on X day and Y day. But then I'm just following I'm just executing a list, and I may as well just watch an anime, right?
Sure. Right. Yeah. So like it's a contradiction in terms. Really cool stuff, obviously, and Atlas is one of my favorite publishers. So I'm hoping a game that really revamps that would be good. But for now, I'm going to save my money and play the Personas that I already own.
Excellent. Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm enjoying it so far. It's very stylish, as you would imagine, coming from Persona 5. I do almost think it's a little bit too much form over function. Like every single UI element is animated and moving and like skewed in weird ways that isn't particularly readable. And it's just, my mind is just,
yeah,
I don't know what I'm looking at.
Those Persona-like menus are kind of like a trope at this point, right?
I feel extremely overstimulated, put it that way.
Yeah, they're quite over the top for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, we're running long. Shall we move on to the tabletop?
Definitely. Yeah,
okay.
Let's do the tabletop. All right, what tabletop games have you been playing?
Yeah, I just quickly wanted to talk about a game that's been returning to my table lately. That is Barrage. So this is a game I've been trying to convince you for a while now to cover. I think one of our guests while I was away was talking about it. It's a heavy Euro game, basically managing water coming through dams as a power source and generating energy to fulfill contracts. Extremely, like, it's a very complicated game, very hard to visualize, but it does have a really cool tactile element in seeing the water literally flowing down the board over the course of the game. It has a sort of physicality to it. So I got a Kickstarter with all the expansions for this game, including some new maps, the original expansion, the Leawater expansion, I think it's called, and a new dual version of the game. So I've been messing with a couple of those. Leawater adds a couple of new things, basically various new ways to spend your building materials, which is tough because I already feel like it's such a tight game, incredibly tight economy with both money and building materials, that I don't really feel like I want to spare anything to go and explore this other side of the board. I've played this expansion online, and I feel there's still so much to pull out of that core mechanic. That it's such a juicy puzzle that I don't want to be distracted and working on something else. So I don't think you really need this expansion unless you're really familiar with that base game. It does take a few games to really internalize the flow of the base mechanics. I didn't like this game the first time I played it. It took me a couple of times to really click. So only if you've really exhausted that. Leawater does add some fun new stuff, but only for advanced players, I think. Duel is the other expansion I played. This adds basically, it's a smaller map for only 2 players, and furthermore, you block off a random number of sort of locations to be able to, so you can't build there. So from turn 1, incredibly excruciating decisions of what you're going to do. It's already a tight game. Now it's even tighter. You've got this sort of tug-of-war system, whereas each round you're going to look at who succeeded in 3 different categories. It might be who has the most gold or who generated the most power this turn. And you basically go up tracks, like pushing and pulling. You're not exclusively going up tracks. You're pushing a counter one way or the other. So you're really invested to be looking very closely at your opponent, obviously, and every single resource that they have and watching them closely. So yeah, super engaging. I don't know. I mean, the game works fine to play on just the regular map. It's already a very tight game. This it was fun playing the dual version, but it's making it incredibly tighter, more cutthroat, meaner. One person falls behind, very little opportunity to catch up. A fun experience, but I think you don't. It's not necessary. You can already play the base game to play if you want if you want to sort of have more room to move around and just explore the engine building at your own pace. So again, maybe for more advanced players who have really mastered that core system and looking to get into the weeds a little more.
Yeah, I played it Barrage a couple times on Board Game Arena.
Mm.
I'm not sold on that game. I'm not writing it off entirely. I need to play it probably in person,
yeah.
and I need to get a walkthrough again of the rules because I don't have it down. And it seems, ironically, very dry for a game about water.
Oh yeah.
But let's hold that discussion for another time, perhaps. Yeah, I'll definitely play that. One game that you and I played recently at Bellingham was the aforementioned event. We played Matches, which is a game
Yes.
that's out from Thing 12 Games. So
Mm.
Matches is a fun card game. It's really simple to play, and it's got some simple but evocative artwork. It's sort of basically
Yeah.
like three or four colors. It's
Mm.
mostly black with some red, yellow, very sort of stark and moody artwork, and would probably go over fairly well in the spooky theme. But
Mm.
any other night too, you can take it camping.
So it had like a
It's
Lovecraftian theme somewhere. It was tied
right.
in with one of their previous games.
Yeah, there's some other like extra bits in this game which
Mm.
connects it to their other Lovecraftian themed game, like you mentioned. So there's kind of components outside of the game, and the game box is sort of themed to look like a box of matches.
That was
with
very
a
cool. Yeah.
friction area on the side. So basically, very simple rules. I'm not going to explain how to play it, but it's a game where you sort of set up a number, and everyone is trying to follow it as many times as possible. And sort of the last person standing who gets the most follows wins and earns points. But the first person to pass also wins points. So you're going to earn a different number of sort of these like colorful spark flame gems. And it's simple to play, but I like how it makes you think about which cards to hold on to and which cards to play, because it might just be smart to pass on a round. You only have,
Set
I
up
think,
for the next one. Yeah.
you only have 4 or 5 rounds to play. So do you want to set yourself up for a better position? That is a juicy decision, and I like that quality of the game. And to me, it was more enjoyable than the other, more family weight game that we played. But Matches, I think that game has some interesting stuff going on there.
Yeah, it was fairly simple, like just handful of numbers, right? Various decisions you're making along the way. Like you can play one card that matches, which adds more points to the pot, or you can play multiple cards that sum up to that number. So you're still in the round, but you don't add to the pot. So there's a juicy decision there in terms of whether you want to. You're just going to stay in and sort of hedge your bets, or do you actually want to add more points to whoever's going to win the rounds, or you're going to drop out early to try and set up your hand for the following round? Because I think you can choose to discard any number of cards, but then whatever you keep it carries across to the following round, right? So yeah, a few layers there for a relatively simple sort of number matching game that it was a good. It would work well, I think, at multiple sort of experience levels and complexity for various game groups. So I liked Matches.
Yeah, thumbs up there. I'm probably going to not talk about the other game that I have on my list because maybe we're going to cover it in a future episode.
Yeah, likewise. I mean, I had another game, but I think we're running long, so let's save that for next episode.
All right. I'm just going to touch upon a couple of experiences. I know that you have some details at length about a game that you've played. Mostly, I've been in my reading setup stages for RPGs. We just had a session that was supposed to happen earlier today. It got canceled, sadly. But I am starting up a new RPG campaign with my regular Wednesday group. We're going to be playing CyberPunk Red.
Ooh.
And this is the first time for me playing that system. I haven't played the older versions of CyberPunk TTRPG either. So I'm going to be taking on a net hacker. So this is the sort of Decker hacker persona. I have a, I think, interesting backstory, so I'm looking forward to playing that. I went down to Bellingham for the third time in 2 weeks today to pick up a couple of packages. I got my Kickstarter fulfilled of Ironsworn, Starforged, Sundered Isles. So this game is from the maker of Ironsworn and Ironsworn Starforged, which is a RPG system that could be played solo, co-op, or GM led.
Nice.
And it is very much like generative. Like it's got a bunch of prompts, tables essentially that you can roll upon, and it's got a really innovative dice system, but really evocative art as well. So these Ironsworn products are really high quality. I've been wanting to get into them a lot, and if any of that interests you, the first books that sort of kicked off this whole like mini empire that the author has, Tompkin, that's his name, is available for free. So Ironsworn, which is the fantasy one, is available absolutely free on DriveThruRPG, or I think it's free on itch.io as well. So go download it today, go play it. There's lots of YouTube videos as well, and I really love these like lay flat coil bound
The
books.
binders, yeah.
I've been wanting to print off some of my PDFs in coil bound, but it's a little expensive. So I was really happy to buy this Kickstarter, which contains some of the materials to play in the sci-fi space. So
Cool.
I'm really excited about playing more of that.
Awesome. Yeah, great to see more solo games. We're both learning just how hard it is to schedule TTRPGs, even more so than board games. It's impossible to talk about these games if your friends don't want to play them, right?
Scheduling is the ultimate enemy of the tabletop RPG.
Yeah. So we might need to look at branching out a little bit and finding some more communities, be either in person or online. Because I mean, I was looking at our local game store this last week, and they've got a bunch of really cool like indie zines and standalone role-playing games that I'm really fascinated to get into, but it might just be reading through and never actually playing, right?
The reading is fun too, though.
Yeah, it's a hobby in of itself. But I did actually get to play a new tabletop RPG this week. Our local game store, Rain City Games, was hosting a series of Mothership. So I think there's running a bunch of sessions, but each of them are standalone one-offs. And so I joined into the first one of that. We've talked about it a little bit in the past. I think it was our guest Gillian on a previous episode had discussed this. And so this is basically, I mean, essentially it's Alien, the role-playing game, not the official licensed one, but playing with the similar aesthetic of Alien, The Thing, and other sort of sci-fi horror vibes. Very simple jump in and play in terms of the character creation. Was very simple. Just roll some dice for some stats, roll some dice for some flair. Basically, like you've got a patch, you've got some random equipment. Pick one of 4 classes. You're ready to go. Partly, I think it's the assumption that you're probably not going to survive very long, so don't get too invested. But it does encourage you to just jump into the action, right? And like discover the character along the way, which is what I personally enjoy. I don't want to sit down and be thinking through a elaborate backstory and twists and betrayals. So yeah, I played through the first a session of Mothership. It was I think it was an authored module. So we're on a submarine. Bad stuff happens. We're all trapped on the submarine, obviously, and things went very bad. I think one person got off the submarine, and that was questionable. That didn't help. Several of the players were coming from a D&D background, right, which comes from obviously a big sense of power fantasy. And I think there was definitely some of that was brought into this in terms of the moment we saw a monster, they started shooting at it and hitting each other more often than the actual alien. So I think only like 1 or 2 of the casualties were actually from the monsters on the ship. There was a lot of friendly fire. And so, I mean, I think one of the rules of Mothership is if you're fighting, you've already lost, basically. So I think it's tough to manage because, like, in terms of managing tone for a horror game, that's incredibly hard to do, and especially when you're trying to play to the mechanics rather than the story. Like from the get-go, it's like, well, we've got this very vague mission of the engineer on the ship is missing, right? No one's seen the engineer. Hey, let's all 5 of us who don't know each other all wander off together to go and look for this person, right? Which doesn't entirely make sense, but mechanically meta mechanics say we should stick together, right? So that didn't entirely gel with the tone of the game. I was trying to look for opportunities to like play against what made sense mechanically and what makes sense for my character, like whether it was going off by myself to investigate something or hanging back from the party and trying to play against the optimal thing and playing into that sort of let things play out slowly for the tone and atmosphere of the game, right? But it's hard to manage with especially with a new group of people who don't know the system, we don't know each other. Not blaming other players at all, but it's hard to manage tone and sort of cohesion for a horror game, especially, right? But I did really enjoy the system. Very easy to jump in and die.
Right. Mothership is quite a darling in the
Mm.
indie RPG scene right now. In fact, starting in all of November through December is what they're calling Mothership Month. I think on BackerKit they're having a multiple Mothership themed campaigns of
Yeah.
work from official stuff from Tuesday Night Games, KNIGHD, who put out official Mothership. And then there's a whole raft of indie creators who've created support supplemental Mothership material. So there's going to be some campaigns for those as well. So I'm pretty excited to see it. I don't know if I'm fully bought into the hype. I thought the rules were a little bit janky when I read them. The freely available kind of pamphlet zine version of the rules, which you can readily download from various places, the ones that I previously mentioned. But go check them out. They're popular for a reason. And then you saw a new product which uses the Mothership rules, right? You want to tell our
Yeah,
listeners about that?
looking at those zines at Rain City, I spotted one called Cloud Empress, and I wasn't entirely sure what this was as to whether it was like an expansion that required the Mothership system. But in doing more investigation, it is a standalone product that's just using a tweaked version of those Mothership rules because the developers of Mothership very much encourage those third-party hacks, similar to Morkborg that we were discussing on a recent episode. And so this is basically taking a sort of a twist on the Mothership rule set as a retro sci-fi with a twist of fantasy, like Nausicaa, I think is the big touch point that they specifically call out, which is a element that I'm really into. I love that those are retro sci-fi vibes. I've been noodling with a board game design that's playing with some similar themes, not Nausicaa, but love that retro sci-fi. Had a really cool aesthetic. So I might have to go back and pick that up, I think.
Yeah, I own the PDF of Cloud Empress, and I can confirm that it does contain all the rules you need to play the game. It is the
Excellent.
Mothership engine, so you don't need Mothership, the previous rules to play it. And the artwork is fantastic. I'm not sure if everyone's aware, but Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind is a Ghibli movie, which is fantastic, my favorite Ghibli, but it started off as a manga, a multi-volume manga, which ran for quite a long time, and it's entirely black and white artwork. And it's beautiful, a beautiful artwork by Miyazaki himself, I believe, if I'm not mistaken. And the art that they've found just really perfectly encapsulates it. It's very kind of low color, but more than black and white artwork in the Cloud Empress book. I think it's like 3-tone or something like that.
Yeah.
Fantastic, very atmospheric. I love those sorts of worlds. I love those sort of kooky sci-fi fantasy worlds. So that's definitely something I'd love to play. And if you're not going to buy it, I will happily buy that zine.
I was planning to pick it up today before our session got cancelled.
There you go. We're going to have to fight for the one copy of it. But you and I have to draw up a list of zines that we're intending to buy and kind of co-own them in a sort of quasi-shared
Start
library.
building a library. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, I'm keen to try more Mothership. I was looked into some of the official modules, and it's like mega dungeons and cities to explore. A bunch of cool authored content that I'm really curious to dig into. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that Mothership month in terms of like it sounds like some really so cool projects. Just the sound of 15 different crowdfunding campaigns happening simultaneously just sounds exhausting. I'm a little burnt out on crowdfunding, to be honest. But hey, not to blame any individual of those projects. I'm sure they are all really strong. It just seems like it's just a lot of work trying to track crowdfunding these days.
I fully agree. Yeah, it is a lot to follow, but I sort of missed out on the previous crowdfunding campaigns for Mothership, so I'd like to pick up at least the
Yeah.
core book. And I'm really, really tempted by those collector's edition boxes, which were, I think, featured pretty prominently on a Quinn's Quest video, if
I
I'm
just
not
watched that this
mistaken.
last week. Yes, yeah.
Yeah, so super tempted there, but I know you don't need those, so I don't know. I don't know if I've fully bought in yet. I want to see if I can buy in or not, if I need
Excellent.
to.
Well, let's try and find some friends actually willing to play these games.
Absolutely. Got to stop myself from buying all those RPGs. There's too many of them. Anyways, speaking of too many and too much, we've talked at length. We covered a bunch of fun stuff. So much fun stuff. Shall we talk about next episode?
Yeah, which we're still not entirely sure on yet. You ambushed me with Lasers and Feelings last episode as our next featured game, but we're struggling to schedule a session of that right now. So we're not entirely sure if and when that's going to happen. So I think we're going to have another playlist. There's still a lot of, like, we both had other games that we want to talk about today. Lots to talk about. It's just hard for us both to schedule one particular game together enough to review it right now. So yeah, more playlists
We have a
coming
couple
up.
of tabletop games. So the next featured game episode might be Lasers and Feelings. It might be another title that we're trying to test as well. But the very next episode for this particular show will be a playlist, sounds like. And it'll be a week from now. So we'll see you again then.
Yep. Well,
For
if
no
you
more
have
game talk.
well, if you have any questions or comments on today's episode or on Lasers and Feelings or any other games you have been playing, you can contact us at omnigamersclub@gmail.com or at omnigamers.club.
Yeah, and go check us out on YouTube if you haven't watched those yet. And if you're watching on YouTube, go catch us in your podcatcher of choice and subscribe, leave some reviews. Love to hear your feedback and any sort of engagement that you want to talk about, any topics you want to talk about. Happy to hear it.
Yep, and you can find me at Board Game Feast, mostly on Blue Sky these days.
Yep, and you can follow me at OmniGamerMark on Blue Sky as well. And welcome to all the recent Twitter migrants over Twitter X Twitters that have come over to Blue Sky in the last few days. You're very welcome, and it's a fantastic place to be.
Yes, great to see the community start to rebuild itself, and hopefully everyone can stay there and not go to the bad place.
There you go. The bad place would be very dangerous. Please don't go there. So, Daniel, until next time, I guess, do you want to lead us out?
Yeah, well, remember to have a balanced diet of games. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.